Hello ladies and gentlemen, Panzer here, and today we're taking a look at a much anticipated game. It is, of course, Grey Goo. This is a game developed by Petroglyph, and if that name sounds familiar, it's because that is a company with a reputation within the real-time strategy or RTS community, in particular those who are fans of the original Command & Conquer franchise by Westwood Studios, and that's partly because Petroglyph is known to be comprised of a lot of veteran developers from the original Westwood Studios, a company that I was very partial to as I am a Command & Conquer fan, having played the original CNC from way back in the day. So this title then, of course, for me has been something that I've been waiting for quite a lot, as this is supposed to be kind of harking back to the original Command & Conquer, and in a lot of ways it is and it isn't. It is still very much modernized, and it has some throwbacks to the original franchises, but for the most part, a lot of it is also very new. So let's get into it. First things first, I want to check out just the options menu and let you guys know what's going on. Gameplay-wise, you can see there's a lot of controls here. They definitely are taking what they know of the RTS franchise and what people would like. And you can see there's a lot of sliders for scrolling alone. And of course, there's a lot of very basic options you can see down here, including health bar display, which is always nice to see. As far as video options go, you've got a lot of different resolutions. You also have borderless window option. However, this works a little bit weirdly in the sense that you have to set it to windowed first and then maximize borderless window. If you are somebody using a more than one screen, for example, I have 3 screens connected to my computer at the moment, you may experience it jumping around between just between different monitors when you switch to windowed as opposed to from full screen. I'm not entirely sure why it does that, but that's a thing that happens. So if you lose it, just move it back and then you can activate borderless window and it seems to work just fine. Advanced video options, it seems to run very well actually on my machine, even though this is not a top of the line machine, but with everything at pretty much maximum, it still doesn't drop below 30 frames per second, and it seems to be fairly stable for the most part. Of course, there's also rebindable hotkeys for just about everything. The interface options also are quite intuitive, actually. You've got a lot of grouping options and a lot of selection options, all using the QWERTY layout, so it's much easier to arrange. And you can, of course, rebind every single one of these, which is really nice. A lot of RTSs don't have that. So you can see there's a lot of options here. Alright, so as far as gameplay goes, what are we looking at? Well, the game itself has 3 main factions: the beta, the humans, and the goo. Of course, goo being the name, the title, of course, this is kind of what the Grey Goo kind of is, but we'll get onto that in a minute. Alright, so I just want to give you a brief rundown on what these factions are. The betas are, although human-like in appearance, are actually, from what I can understand, a form of primate, or at least a form of alien anyway. They have 4 arms, or rather they have a set of primary arms and a set of secondary arms, so they actually have more limbs. And most of their units are actually sort of walker based, from what you can see here. But for the most part, inclusive of epic units and stuff, all the factions have the same basic units. They all have an infantry, an anti-armor, a tank of some sort. It's the same across the board. The humans are a little bit different in the sense that despite being called humans, nearly all of their units are actually drones. So it's a little bit of an interesting take on a futuristic human military where everything is sort of an unmanned drone, and everything has this sort of ethereal looking design to it, almost, I would say, reminiscent of the Protoss, actually, in StarCraft. Of course, StarCraft veterans will probably correct me on that, but the design seems to resemble more of an alien type, whereas the beta seems to be more of what you might expect from a traditional human force, actually. And then there's the goo. While the goo actually has a different or rather actually very similar units, the production style is very different. As you can see, the text tree is very different. So I'm going to go into the game and show you one by one of what they're all like, and of course explain some of the gameplay mechanics. So I'm going to load up a skirmish here. There's also a full campaign as well, but that is, of course, going to comprise of a lot of the stuff that I'm going to show you anyway, aside from, of course, storyline. Now, there's a selection of maps here. There's not a lot of maps, so that's what I've noticed, but I'm assuming because there is a custom maps option, and I believe there's a map editor, or at least in the works. I've not actually gone and checked that out yet, but there will be the option for player-created maps in future as well. So, a lot of different game modes. You've got the standards, and then there's Annihilation as well, or a Destroy HQ one, which against the Goo will be an interesting one to see. And of course there's free-for-all and team modes as well, and you can enable or disable the epic units, which of course are large hero units. So I'm going to just quickly load up one of these maps and show you what's what. Now, of course, this is fully Steam integrated, so matchmaking is done using the Steamworks function, as far as I can tell. And the AIs here as well, you've got even random AI difficulty, and for the most part the AI is actually reasonably smart. They do behave in a very human-like fashion, actually. Okay, so we're just going to set it as a random faction on an easy AI, and we're going to check out the betas first, and there's also a bunch of different skin options. Let's go with yellow, because why not? Alright, so we're now in the game, and each side has a unit that it starts off with, as well as a form of HQ, and this is all unique per side. The interface as well, in the typical CNC fashion actually, also is stylized accordingly, and it has a very StarCraft looking aspect to it in this particular faction. So, build style as well is very different for each faction. But first things first, I want to talk about the resources. Alright, so resources here at the top are simply just called resources, and there's also a resource rate, so you can actually see how well your economy is keeping up at a glance. The betas actually build these structures, and if I was just click refinery, you can actually see different points it can connect to. And this is exactly how their resource, or rather their building functions. So if I was to place one here, and then place a resource extractor over here, you can see the position I place it on. The outer ring only gains us 8 per second, whereas the center does 10 per second. I don't think you'd want to put more than one at a time, because these resources, again in typical CNC fashion, also do deplete. It looks like we're facing against another beta faction right here as well. So let's just get this guy out of the way. Now, you can see the AI is actually smart enough to start scouting immediately, so they can actually see what we're doing, but of course, you wouldn't expect me to be doing anything different at this stage. And right now we can actually build a factory as well to start producing units. And you can see the way that the beta does everything is when you place it, a sort of, I suppose, ship flies in and then starts constructing, and it is of course a walker of sorts as well, as everything in the beta is. And these harvester units as well, they'll go to the extractor and then go back and forth. These guys can be attacked as well, so if you want to disrupt supply routes, that's one way of doing it.
Here to assist.
Alright, so building, how it works here is, let's start with building a basic infantry unit. You can see it actually builds in this frame here, and we have 3 spare queue slots available, so if I was to fill that up with other units, you can see now this entire factory is locked out. We can also build at any place without selecting any factory, which is quite a nice feature as well.
Unit in production.
Now, how we actually build additional units, or unit types, is by building attachments. In addition, the beta, the way they build structures is by placing hubs down of varying sizes. So a small hub allows you to build 2 different structures. So in this case, if I was to place one here, you can see that the red square means that it's blocked off, and we're not able to actually place anything there.
Unit ready. Unit in production.
So what I think I will do to help with our economy is to actually place one here near the entrance, And that will allow us to build a refinery here as well as build a factory. So that will help with our production abilities. But this is how they actually build. This is the essence of their sort of build style, is that they can drop down these hubs. And you can drop them anywhere that you have explored. So if I explore even further, so we can see over here there's another resource point. I can actually just drop down a hub right here.
Complete. Beginning construction.
And this allows us to expand very quickly because there's no limitation on actual positions we can build at. The hubs themselves provide power for all of the structures that we need, so there's no need to really build much further than that. These resource pools are also linked, so if you notice, there was actually a... I think I can show this again. You can actually see the overlay kind of stretches across to see where it actually is connected to. So we can actually connect more extractors to the same refinery if we so choose. However, that also means, as you can see, there's a little arrow there. It shows the path that the actual harvesters will take to go between that. And that's cutting across a path which I don't want. So I'm going to just build a refinery here instead and drop that there. And then of course we can put a factory down. There's also large factories, and these are actually interesting in the sense that in fact all factions have this structure. They have the ability to build large factories, and what that does is if you queue up 3 units at once, it will allow you to build all 3 of them simultaneously, which is very different to a lot of old RTS styles. In the past you'd have to actually have more production facilities to build things simultaneously, but this allows you to actually build 3 at once. And it can be of any composition you choose. So it is actually very advantageous to have something like that. So in this case we might put a hangar down over here, and that will allow us to build aircraft. Except that it doesn't immediately. This allows you to produce them, but if you want to actually build offensive air units, you have to actually add the air attachment to that hub. It actually matters which hub it's connected to. So think about it this way, each hub is a sort of universal structure, and then you actually have to upgrade them accordingly. So in this case, in order to build air units, over here we'd have to put an air attachment there. So you can see we can only build a Stratus, which is the scout unit for the beta, but we don't have access to the Warbird or the Nimbus because we do not have an attachment, and it's all dependent on this central hub here, in which case is our headquarters or the small hubs.
Tell me where to aim.
And that's really how it's done. Combat-wise, it's pretty much the same as what you'd see in the old CNC games.
Give me the word.
All about particular unit mixes and combinations, as well as generally how you'd build things like rushes and particular types of groups that way. Of course, I'm no RTS veteran, I never played professionally or anything like that, so skill-wise, most of you that are, I suppose, veterans in a way, will probably be screaming at me now, but this is just to kind of give you a basic idea. So you can see here we can actually build a large factory now, so we're going to do that. Now, of course, you're probably wondering, okay, is such things such as build order and all that still important? And yeah, it is still really important. You don't want to overexpand too quickly. Like you can see here, we still have a net income happening. But the thing is, if you start to build too much at once, for example, if I start building a couple of cloudbursts, when things are in production, you might actually start noticing our income is starting to drop. We're actually under attack over there, so let's send our units back over. And of course we can remotely repair structures as well, but that costs resources. And of course this could be an early loss for us, as we're completely unprepared for this sort of thing, but that's just the nature of playing this and trying to commentate and explain things at the same time. I'm not particularly good at that at all.
Refinery under attack.
I'm in trouble.
Alright, but hopefully this gives you a basic idea of what this faction is like. I'm now going to hop out of this and jump into the next faction. Alright, so now we're playing as the human faction, and as I say that, you might immediately notice the design of it is very different. This is very advanced high-tech. You can see the entire interface has changed as well. In fact, the design of it is very, very alien, actually. It doesn't seem to be what you'd expect from the humans. But immediately I'm going to point out one thing that you might have just noticed then. Building structures is very different for the humans as compared to the betas. In fact, the humans and betas are the closest in, I would say, in terms of overall design, but the way that they function is very, very different simply because of the way base building is done. They still have a refinery and extractor system, and they still have a harvester unit that goes between the two. So that may all seem very similar, but if I go and build a factory, for example, you might see immediately...
Core under attack.
Oh, we're already under attack, and it looks like we're playing against the Goo faction, which is a very interesting one. So you can see here there's this sort of grid system that forms around the HQ. I can't place a building just on its own. I can't do that. It won't allow me. How we actually do this is by placing the structure in the green spot, as we did with the betas.
Constructing.
And all units, or rather all structures, have to be adjacent to one another. This is very similar to the very simple design that the original CNC had. I'm talking about Tiberian Dawn, where all structures had to be adjacent to each other in some form. We're talking about one grid square maximum distance. So you might remember a tactic from then, if you have played that, where you'd build sandbag walls out and then use those as adjacent structures in order to do things. And actually, that kind of applies to this faction, because here we have something called a conduit, and this functions as a sort of power line. So if I was to drag this out now, like this, once it's completed building, I can actually then place something, or in fact, while it's building, I can already place something down like this. And the crosses themselves are the junction points. So we can connect other conduits to it, or we can simply build straight out. We can only build in places that we have explored, so let's just move our Trident drone further out. And you can see we can actually build all the way up to that. These don't seem to impede movement, because all of the human units seem to hover in a way, so they're not really... It's not really a huge issue at all, but...
Beginning construction.
One thing that you will notice, if you are already quite, I suppose,
what can I do for you?
quite sharp-eyed, you might already notice one issue that will come up with this particular faction, and that is destroying any of these. In fact, I can just do this to demonstrate it right now. Causes that to shut down. Yeah, so it is possibly a weakness of this faction, but...
Unit in production. Beginning construction.
Yes, it is possibly a weakness of this particular faction, and I've noticed that it does mean that expanding might be somewhat slower for this particular faction, as compared to the beta anyway, and even the Goo. This might actually be the slowest faction to expand.
Unit in production.
But I've also noticed that they seem to build most units a lot faster than others as well, so forming swarms of drones is entirely possible. This is quite helpful as well because they don't have the highest of health. Like, these hit points that they have are not very, very high. So that is something to be aware of as well. The playstyles are completely different for each side, I will definitely say that. And they all have their unique character to them.
Cylinders are charged. Group in motion.
But for the most part, it seems to still be sort of the same thing, you know, build a factory, build an attachment. In fact, as compared to the betas where you have to attach it to the hub, in this case, if I want to build a tank attachment, I can just attach it to the actual factory.
Unit ready.
like this. And that little circular symbol right here will indicate that it's affecting that
Beginning construction.
that position.
Coordinating. Assist.
So of course we're getting a lot of scouts checking us out right now. So and we also have access to large factories and airpads, but you notice there's no hubs because that's not the way that this faction works. So we can actually put another factory down there.
Beginning construction.
And interestingly, while a factory is being built, we can even start upgrading it already to be able to build different things. So in this case I might want to build a stealth attachment over here where the little star is located.
Beginning construction.
And I can, once it's built, I have access to the dagger,
Complete.
which is a sort of stealth detector unit. One thing that you want to take note of as well, there is a new mechanic that you may not see in a lot of games. I think maybe Warcraft 3 used to do this as well. If you look at this vegetation over here, this is actually movable terrain. The cursor does not change. This can be moved through. All units can move through this, and when they do that, you notice they start changing to a greenish color. This means they're in vegetation. They are completely hidden here, and they can fire out of there. The only way of detecting them would be either when they shoot at you, or if you're using a stealth detector unit such as the dagger, which can detect stealth and also has brush vision. So any unit that is cloaked will be revealed by this, as is any unit that is inside this brush area. They will be detected by that. But these are... In fact, that's a detector unit right there as well.
Support on target.
This unit can actually see us, but they didn't stop to attack, which is interesting. But these can be moved completely through. In fact, there are some places on the map, as you can see, this is also marked by a little sort of cross-hatched marking down here. There are some places on the map where it is entirely brush, and you can move straight through it as a sort of shortcut. The only problem with that is the enemy can do the same thing as well, and they could even plant ambushes down there. So that is something to be aware of as well. Alright, so we can see that this is the basics of this particular faction. And there's also, you know, we can select between light, heavy, and air units, but of course selecting a factory will allow us to see all of the units as well, up into the alpha unit, or the epic unit. Alright, so since we're playing against the Goo as well, I think, without staying too much on one particular faction at a time, I think I explained most of the mechanics by playing as the beta, so now I'm going to jump over to the last and possibly most interesting faction, the Goo. Alright, and behold the mighty Goo, and of course, look at the wonderful UI design here. It's a lot of very hex style. Now, I'm not too familiar with the actual lore behind this, but as far as I can tell, these are like basically amoeba-type creatures, but they're sort of biosynthetic, or at least they look slightly synthetic. But this isn't an HQ. This is not... Well, it kind of is an HQ unit. But this isn't the HQ that you might have noticed from the bases and humans, because this is a unit. It is a very powerful unit capable of absorbing enemies by simply moving over them. So if you, of course, have an enemy that is slow enough to be caught by this, it gets consumed almost immediately and gets added to the hit points. This also is a production meter. In fact, the Goo is the most interesting faction because their builder unit, which is the Mother Goo, is also a production facility and a resource gatherer. There's no resource meter here at all. You might have noticed that. It's missing completely. The reason being is resources are gathered by the Goo and used directly in production. So by placing the Mother Goo over here, slowly starts, in fact, a really nice looking animation like that. It starts to gather resources, and you can see it builds up, and that adds not just to its hit points, but also as it fills up these bars, it will be able to produce units of a particular strength or size. Now we have our basic infantry unit here. And these aren't particularly powerful in terms of their actual hit points. In fact, they have some of the lowest hit points in of any unit, really. Okay, we can see we've actually leveled up to the second bar down here. And each of these costs different amounts. You can actually see right here, the small protein costs a single bar, a large protein will cost 3. And they all have a population cap that they require. A mother goo, however, does not add to your population cap of 200. They actually are added to these bars below, and this is the maximum number of mother goos you can have. So we're going to now morph a small protein. And you might have noticed actually the mother goo is getting bigger. So going with the idea of amoebas, what happens is they split. And this is a small protein. This is a production unit which can morph into any of these infantry units. However, it is also a combat unit. This is capable of attacking. It's not just that, but it's also a very fast scout. We can see, as compared to our little drover, it seems to move pretty much just as fast. In fact, that's the most interesting thing about this particular faction, is that all of its production units are capable of doing this. And this has a sort of sludge attack, which seems to add a status and maybe damage over time. I'm not really too sure. But it adds a sort of status to that. And you can see right here, our drover is already dead. So, one thing to take note of is that they can split and will produce 4 drovers at a time, or 2 striders, or 2 scouts, or even 2 tempests, which is very interesting indeed. So here we can already morph a second mother goo, and because of what the mother goo is, it's so versatile that we can actually expand very, very, very quickly. In fact, I would go so far as to say, and I may not be entirely correct on this, as I'm not an RTS veteran of any sort, maybe, but they probably would be the faction that is most adept at map control, simply because their main living unit performs so many functions and is able to take over resource points very quickly. So we can actually just go and kill this. Yeah, it seems to have a slowing effect actually on units. And I've noticed as well, when it attacks a production facility, it seems to slow down the function of that facility and possibly disable it entirely. One thing to take note of course, all of the goo units, as far as I can tell, are entirely capable of regenerating health as well. All of them seem to be capable of doing that. Of course, at varying rates and up to varying amounts of hit points, but generally they seem to all be capable of doing that. So all of these proteins all have different functions. Even the stealth detector in the form of the large protein, which is your vehicular production unit, if you want to call it that. And of course we can upgrade our tech. Something that I didn't really show in the other factions, but basically you just build a structure that allows you to do upgrades. But for the purpose of the goo, by simply going to the tech upgrades, you just spend a point and some time to get it. You get these tech credits, and then you can sort of unlock these abilities, which is very interesting to see. So we can actually upgrade some of these. So here we can actually morph another one. I think we can get a third mother goo already, so our third one, we can even place this over here, and that means we now have 3 bases. So we've already taken over 3 points on the map. We can morph another protein over here, and morph another small protein out of this, and you can see it's very, very quick. Compared to the other factions, this is a lot faster. And one thing to take note as well, there's also steep terrain, there's large cliffs and things which a lot of units cannot go over. Such is not a problem for the goo, they can just simply flow right over it, allowing them to cross terrain very, very quickly. Additionally, things like walls and most structures don't seem to impede the movement of the goo, they can simply just go right through it. So the proteins themselves, even without morphing into anything, are quite effective at what they do. So we're going to try and get a large protein. In fact, no, let's just get another Mother Goo out of here. We can see we can just keep splitting them and just keep taking over resource points very, very fast. So, the Goo, very interesting faction and possibly very, very powerful. Is it overpowered? I have no idea. I really don't have any idea at all whether this is something that is overpowered or not. I really don't. Right, we don't have enough for a... One thing to take note of as well, the Mother Goos themselves require less resources to produce than the large Proteomes. That should tell you quite a lot, actually. And you can see the Mother Goo there just absorbing all of those little drones, and it gains resources as a result of doing that, so that's another thing. Right, we can actually see that one of our Proteans, I was going to say one of our Goos, one of our Proteans over here has been damaged, and that's its hit points there, but it will slowly regenerate that as well. But of course, if we want to, we can then just take that and morph it into a bunch of Drovers, who will start off with slightly less hit points than they would otherwise have, but they will actually regenerate that. So this actually it's a really powerful faction and very, very versatile. We have another Mother Goo over there, and we can get our first large Protean over here. Now, I did mention that the unit variety is for the most part kind of a mirror between the factions. The Goo has its own types of units, though. They are slightly different. And I'm going to show you what I mean by that. Well, if we go to the large Protean over here, we can actually see they've got a Dweller, which is actually a stealth mine unit. It's kind of a suicide bomber, almost. And what that does is it burrows underground and then it's armed and ready to attack. And it's completely stealth, so only stealth-detecting units can actually detect it. And then we have our tanks over here, which have, as far as I can tell, the highest alpha damage, but the slowest rate of fire. Let's just morph that into... Oh, no. I'm going to lose that. Right, this Mother Goo is being attacked, but we can see it's actually gaining health from the resource point, as well as regenerating on its own as well. So far as I can tell, it will only regenerate this first bar. The rest of it has to come from a resource point. So it doesn't just grow on its own over time. And of course the last thing we have is this Bastion, which is blocking line of sight and fire. So it's a very defensive unit that stops other units from being attacked. So if you want to protect something really quickly, just morph a Bastion and you'll be able to do that. So overall, a very, very unique faction indeed. And I like the overall style of it. Like, they really just resemble amoebas in every possible way. They just seem to be this sort of, yeah, a living faction, and they've really embodied that very, very well. Alright, the last thing we can do is form a ProtoPurger, which is a sort of alpha or epic unit. And this one is, while it's not able to attack and is quite vulnerable, it's able to become the epic unit, and you have to feed units to it to... I'll just morph it and I'll show you what it does. Basically, yes, now this Mother Goo is a ProtoPurger. So what we can do now is we can take... Let's just put this Mother Goo somewhere. Incidentally, they seem to speak in sort of dubstep. That's just a thing I've noticed. Right, so we can send our Proteans in there, or we can even send any unit into there to power it up, if you will. And once it's at maximum, then it'll become the Perjure, which is our epic unit. So let's go and do that. We can, of course, morph more Proteans and feed it into that. So that's a thing we can do. So let's just keep producing proteins. It's kind of like the meat grinder from Yuri's Revenge, if you remember that game. It's like you feed it into it to get resources. Add some Mother Goo over there, but we're not interested in that. We just want to get our epic unit out. You might have noticed I'm not really playing the game fully yet. That's because I'm just trying to explain how things work, and when I've done that, then I will maybe play on my own, I think. I think this is the sort of game I'd enjoy playing on my own. But I just love that the goo itself can seem to sort of flow around everything. Like, it doesn't seem to be a very traditional faction at all. I wonder how many more we need. Let's just morph some more proteins out and just see. I think we'll leave this one to be a little bit more defensive in this sense, so it can stay here. So our little Perjure over here is going to take some more time to do something, but of course this is the only unit that isn't actually a sort of split, if you will. It is actually the only one that is an evolution, so if we take Mother Goo, this will just push the Mother Goo and convert it into a Perjure, or the ProtoPurger. So it is definitely not something that can simply split off. Keep pushing this one. We are draining the resources quite quickly. That is something I've noticed about the Goo as well, that they seem to drain the resource points much faster than other units, or rather other factions. I'm not entirely certain whether that is true, but it just seems to be happening very quickly. So we can keep producing these to kind of merge with them. Let's actually see how this looks. It just sort of absorbs into it. I've just gotten an achievement for that as well.
Unit under attack.
Uh-oh. Mother Goo over here under attack right now. So let's go here and morph. Nope, they died. This one could be in trouble here.
Unit under attack.
Very well could be. Alright, so we've lost that one. I don't think they're very happy with us trying to build this. No. I mean, I wouldn't be. So, they're probably not. Let's actually build some units so we can survive a little bit longer. But I can definitely see that one very valid tactic is to kind of keep your proteins in their protean state while waiting to attack, or rather just using that, because these units themselves don't have that sort of ability, as far as I can tell. Not all of them have the same. Like, you can see these destructors, which are our tanks, can't cross this area, whereas our proteans can. So keeping them in the protean state until you reach the enemy to attack could be a very valid tactic, and especially because the large proteins can detect stealth, so you can avoid some unwanted ambushes along the way. See, the ProtoPurger is almost done there. I don't think we need to continue feeding it. It is pretty much already done. And of course you can see at any time how much damage these have, what damage type they have, what armor they have. So this does an AoE damage of 3, has no armor. This has armor of 3 and AoE damage of 42, which is quite high. And in fact, if we mouse over that, we can see armor, penetration, rate of fire, all of these in actual numbers, which is something all games, as far as I'm concerned, should be doing where relevant, because it's always better to have actual numbers to work with and to calculate from, rather than arbitrary bars or symbols or statistics that don't seem to make any sense outside of the game or have any sort of grounded real value. This giving you the actual numbers all the time makes it much easier to figure out. Alright, so this Proto-Purger is about to evolve into the Perjure. I've never actually seen one before, so this will be interesting. And there it is, it's evolved into the Perjure, which is a movable unit that seems to be something out of a Japanese, possibly, yes, a Japanese pornographic film. It still retains its sort of amoeba-like quality, but it seems to have, like, the tentacles of the Kraken coming out of it. It's a very, very slow-moving unit, but if you look at this, it has an AoE damage of 400. I've not compared this with the other epic units, but that's pretty damn high. And, of course, a range of 800, which is more than I can say for even our tanks. I'm not sure how that compares to artillery units, but it's definitely much higher than a lot of others. In addition, some units can fire while moving and some can't, and some require upgrades to do so. So it's can actually just... yeah, we need that. That would be a good idea to have. And is there anything else we could get? Goo Splash. But yes, one thing to take note of as well with regards to the goo, they don't seem to have a build time for any of these things, aside from, of course, the epic units and the upgrades. But all of their units seem to instantly build when it's available. So they just split immediately. Alright, let's see how this works. This is a Proto-Purger as well, so we do want to get rid of that. Yeah, sending Proteomes in to attack a Proto-Purger might not be the best of ideas. We might actually want to morph them first. It appears that they have some sort of artillery. So this is the the Perjure's attack. Seems to be underground. But yes, we don't want to be in melee range of it because it seems to absorb everything. But yes, underground tentacle attack, always nice to see. Yes, that is certainly epic indeed. And I'm just wondering, can we get more of these? Yes, we can. Alright, let's get the Perjure out of there. Or not. Actually. Okay, move back. No, you move. There we go.
Unit under attack. Unit under attack. Unit under attack. Added unit under attack. Economic attack upgrade complete. Unit under attack.
Okay, so that's the goo. So there you have it, ladies and gentlemen. That is a very, very quick look at Grey Goo. It's by no means exhaustive, but hopefully from this video you can kind of have an idea of what the game will look and play like in regards to all the different factions. The game has a full single-player campaign, as well as skirmish and online multiplayer as well. And they've done a very good job with it, as far as I can tell, because it is traditional and modernized at the same time, yet it's a very solid release. There's also not much in the way of bugs that I've noticed. Sometimes you might encounter a couple of graphical issues from time to time, but nothing overly noticeable. And believe me, I tried looking. But as far as actual game-breaking bugs, doesn't seem to be any from what I can tell. Of course, your mileage may vary. But as far as releases from Petroglyph goes, I think this is something that people were definitely waiting for. In the wake of the shutdowns of things like the Command & Conquer Generals alpha that was in the works, and of course before that a game called End of Nations, which a lot of people have forgotten about, but it just sort of disappeared off the face of the planet. And I guess when we talk about traditional CNC franchises, with Red Alert 3 being the only recent release from the franchise at all, it leaves a lot to be desired in the whole traditional RTS community. So with right now StarCraft 2 being the kind of king of the market, who knows, now Grey Goo has appeared, it could be a possible contender. It definitely has gameplay mechanics that are solid and, as far as I can tell, balanced. Of course, if you are more experienced, you may know a little bit more than I do. But yes, it's a very good-looking game, and more so than that, it plays very well. In fact, I've had a lot of fun with it already. And top it off, it even has music from the original soundtrack creator for the Command & Conquer franchise, Frank Klepacki, so that's something else to look forward to and scratch that nostalgia itch of yours. So pick it up if you are interested in real-time strategy, both traditional and the sort of modern style kind of hybridized into this kind of title. And if you are a fan of CNC, definitely this is not one to miss. So there you have it, ladies and gentlemen. This has been Panzer taking a look at Grey Goo. It is now available on Steam right now for $49.99 US dollars, or your regional equivalent currency $29.99 in the UK. Thank you very much for watching, and I'll see you next time.